Hello, everyone.
I'm Carl.
And I'm Em.
Welcome to our podcast discussing all of the latest books. This is our 9th episode, and we will be discussing The Perfect Marriage by Jeneva Rose. We will be saving our ratings until the very end.
We promise to give you all of our honest opinions on all the characters, chapters, and scenarios. We don't mean any harm to any of the authors. This is solely our opinion. We promise, as always, to Karl and like we read them.
Period. Also, before we begin, please check any trigger warnings. I don't believe there are any in the actual description in the book. However, there is definitely death and dying in this book. Lethal injection is mentioned at the end. There is sexual content. It's here or there. The prologue makes it seem like it might be throughout the entire book, but there's only like a scene or two after that. And then there's the potential for, and this is a little bit of a spoiler alert also, which you'll see as we go through, but wrongful conviction or false confessions, different things like that. It's related to the book. It's probably not as triggering as it could be, but it is talked about. So take care of yourselves.
There also probably needs to be a trigger warning for domestic violence as well.
There are a couple of scenes where the alleged abuser is aggressive and attacks, so just a heads up.
If you don't want to hear how this book ends, please pause here, go read the book, and then come back to this episode. And there will be spoilers that lie ahead. Are you ready to get started? I guess
Get into it.
Okay. So, to start things off, the prologue, which was a very strong opening. It was not follow through the rest of the book as detailed, at least, as what the prologue was. My notes literally said, okay, ... That's a strong opening with a blushing face. So it caught me off guard. It was very out of the blue, out of nowhere. But it's also set up for what it wasn't. So I was expecting the rest of the book to have those scenes that caught me off guard. Yeah. But they were very, very mild compared to the opening.
I agree. I texted Emily and was like, oh, that's what we're reading. And then as I read it, I was like, okay, no, never mind. That's not what we're reading.
It was not in the same ballpark of the rest of the book, but
not at all.
I guess it set your expectations pretty high. It got you down pretty low as far as what was going to be in there.
I was just going to say, I think part of that was like the mystery of whether or not it was written about his mistress or wife. I think that might have been the intention, but again, I do agree that I think it started off, and I was like, I had recommended my aunt to read it, and I was like, oh gosh, I just recommended this book to her, and now it's going to be super sexual. I can't do that. And then it wasn't.
Well, and also for the fact that it really does kind of have the last sentence saying, did he kill her? And which honestly, you didn't even really know there was a mistress until like the second or third chapter. So starting off, you very well could have thought it was the wife. Because the first chapter does go through that they've been married for over 10 years. She gets him a little watch with an engraving, which was really cute, of how many minutes were in 10 years. I really thought this was like a lovey-dovey story to begin with, and it did not completely turn out to be that case. But
honestly, I thought that until the very end that she loved him.
Yes.
It took me completely by surprise. And I'm sure that was obviously the intention of the author, but I didn't get any sort of hint during chapters that were from her point of view. I was blindsided.
I'm going to be honest, I really thought so because it seemed like the obvious one, but even the twist she put on who it ended up being just caught me off guard. But it definitely ended up throwing me for a loop a little bit. But I really did appreciate that cute little scene. And there was a quote that I really liked that they talked about their love, and they said it burns, but it's a good type of burn. Like small fires we sometimes need in our lives to remind us that we're alive. And it was a really cute saying.
I agree.
But we do end up finding out that they plan on going to their extra cabin that they have for their anniversary, and Adam's on his way there, and Sarah going to go to work for a little bit and then try to make it out to the cabin. She is an attorney. He is a writer. So
she's the #1 criminal defense attorney. I thought that was really cool. I didn't know that before going in. So when I found that out, I thought it was really cool.
It was a nice detail to add to the story in the end as well.
Yeah. Obviously, it served her well.
Yes. So in chapter 2, we get on to where we end up finding out that Adam is actually cheating on his wife with a girl named Kelly, which he met in town, which we learn a little bit about her story.
That also took me by surprise because the first chapter, it's essentially talking about how much Adam wants Sarah to come to the lake house. And then that's not really the case because Adam has a mistress at the lake house and he does it regularly and knows that Sarah's not going to come. And I was like, how she never, not even by chance, one time caught them surprises me.
Well, and that's my thought with that whole situation is Kelly was already there before Sarah texted and say, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to show up." So there was still a sliver of a chance that she may end up there while they were in the middle of getting busy.
Especially because it was their
So
10-year anniversary. It was a regular
yes,
weekend, so she might have actually made it a priority. There was a chance at least. Maybe not a massive chance, but there was a slight chance, and I thought that was bold to be
at least
thinking
from
that.
Adam's perspective, there was a chance. We've ended up finding out that there
That's
was
how it was
our
written, yes. I don't think
yeah.
he actually believed that. That's how it was written so that the reader believed it was, I guess.
And he almost seemed upset with her because she missed, but at the same time, he's literally in bed with some other woman at the same time. So it was very
Okay,
confusing.
not only is he in bed with some other woman, but she literally picks up his phone and says, "Your wife texted you."
Yeah.
And they act like it's no
Yeah.
big deal. That's what shook me the
And
most.
he kinda seemed offended that she was saying, "Hey, your wife texted you too." I remember thinking that's kinda weird that he's upset about the fact that she knows the situation, even though they talk about it. So it's
It was just
I don't know,
weird.
it was something weird there,
It's
yeah.
not what I pictured for an affair. Like, in my mind, when someone has an affair, they don't talk about it being an affair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not married, so I've never had an affair, so I don't know, but that's how I would picture it, and this was not it at all. I was surprised.
Well, and he makes the comment too, which was weird also in that scenario. He said, "I've always felt like Sarah was taking on the world while I was struggling to live in it." And are
How's
you
that her problem?
I mean, you're the one that chose to be a writer that goes out to a random cabin in the middle of nowhere to write your stories. And
Sleep with
not
a
only that, but
random
you're
woman.
cheating on your wife. So you're clearly not struggling that bad in the world.
And
So,
also, she provides all of this stuff for you. You're only able to have that lake house and have time to write because she works her tail off and makes the money, and you
yeah.
get to thrive off of it. And also, I might have been a little butthurt because he literally talks like so bad about Sarah and so good about his mistress and how he's saving the day. And you can tell it really isn't even about the mistress, it's about him. He feels good about himself because he thinks he's saving her, and that's really what's
Mhm.
feeding it.
Yeah. So then we get into chapter 3 where she is staying late at the office. It's very short chapters for a little bit, and she just states that she's in the office. Her assistant and her decided to go out to drink at the bar, and she makes the comment, which it was an empowering comment, I guess you can say. So I notated it, but it says, "Two women trying to make it in a man's world. We work twice as hard as our male counterparts to make it just an inch ahead of them." And I mean, that is a lot of this world, women trying to get ahead and work their way up the ladder. It is a lot harder for a woman to be able to do that, especially trying to start a family and stuff like that, as she said, is something that she had to push off to be able to achieve what she's gotten to and things like that. So there's sacrifices that have to be made to be successful in that kind of world.
Yeah, well, and again, coming back to the fact that she has done really well for herself, and Adam gets to benefit from that, and yet he's still complaining because she doesn't need him. I'm just going to say this, and I'm only going to say it once because I'm not going to keep coming back to it. But it really made me mad that he held against her that she wasn't ready for a family, but he's literally sleeping with another woman as if he's ready
Hmm.
for a family while dad's over here.
Hmm.
Like, what? I did not.
Yeah.
That made me really mad.
So chapter 4, he actually talks about at first like he's leaving Kelly to go back to Sarah, which I do think without the cheating involved was kind of sweet that he was like, you know what, I am going to go back spend my 10-year anniversary with my wife, but because he's leaving the bed of his mistress is kind of making it pretty sour. But
Let me ask you
it was a
this.
nice
That
attempted thought.
that's the scene where he writes the note, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
when you very first read the note, how did you take it?
I took it as he was just basically saying, hey, thanks for the good night. I'll see you later. Make sure you clock out by this time. Like I did not take it as what the officers end up coming back and coming with.
Okay, so when I very first read it, I took it as he was going to leave Sarah and be with Kelly.
Yes, yes.
Obviously, it flips once she's murdered. It does seem suspicious on the opposite way, but I definitely read it at first thinking, is he really going to leave Sarah and end up with Kelly? Like, you
Yeah.
thought that was a good idea? No wonder you're not successful. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah. Well, and then he gets back and because she basically says, "Hey, I'm ready to have a kid."
The fact that he had just had sex with Kelly gets back into
Yes.
bed, she says this, and then he has sex with her, and it was all
Uh-huh.
unprotected, obviously. Gave me such an ick. Like, I was so bothered. I think that's what bothered me about the whole thing the most was that particular.
So let me ask you this while we're on this chapter. Why do you think she had sex with him if she ended up being the murderer?
That's
I
actually
think
a
it
great
was to
question.
collect DNA.
That's actually a really good question. I think it was more of a plot to keep Adam ignorant.
Maybe. Because what if she would have ended up pregnant? I mean, she had this whole scheme to have the dad
I bet you
go
she had other protective measures that she took to avoid that.
to.
Because we found out real quick afterwards that she ended up pregnant by the other dude and had a baby and a family. So
Yeah.
I think she knew the whole time she didn't want to have a family with Adam.
I don't know.
I think she
Hmm.
slept with Adam and told him that she wanted to have a baby and start a family so that Adam would never ever second guess that it could have been her. I
Yeah.
will say though, and we passed it I think already, but the chapter where it's written that her and Anne go have drinks is
Hmm.
written so well that I was like, man, she has an airtight alibi. And then
Hmm.
when at the end, obviously we find out she doesn't, I was like, that was good work. I kept
I
coming back to that.
Yeah. Well, and then not only that, but the entire time I was like, it was definitely her. And then I was like, but that seems like really hard to do. How would she do that?
Well, it didn't feel like she had enough of a time period for me to get there and do it and get back, and then him also get, and their cars weren't passing on the road or, something crazy like that. I didn't feel like there was enough time in the day for that to happen. But obviously, I was wrong.
Okay, so he then decided he was going to leave Kelly instead of leaving Sarah to start this family with her because supposedly that's all he ever wanted and all that kind of thing.
I literally texted you, by the way, and said, I don't like how Adam writes about Kelly. Literally, it's almost stalkerish, like an obsession. It wasn't
Yeah,
love, it was more of it feeds his ego.
the chase and the intact infatuation. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's weird. And then I texted you because you said I was right on who the killer was about chapter 15, and I texted you and I said, "Okay, so it's Sarah?" Question mark. Oh,
So then chapter 5, Adam is asleep next to Sarah and she starts getting up to go to work and she kind of, and again this is another storyline that kind of made me doubt that it was her because she has a unread text from Anne that lights up and it basically just says, hey, did you make it home? Sorry about last night. We all do dumb stuff when we're drunk. I'm gonna be honest, when I read that line I thought because of them talking about Anne's obsession with Sarah that she had tried to make a move on Sarah, to be
I did
honest.
too.
Like I kind of considered that a little bit. So when she gets into the office, which Anne is her secretary, if you have not read the book, they end up running into Bob, who is this obnoxious narcissist.
Bob is not at all
Like,
like we talked about this before. At the end, I'm so confused by the ending because Bob is not what I pictured, and maybe it's because his name, I don't know. But I pictured some older man with a toupee and he sweats a
yes.
lot and he's gross and he's
And just by his actions and stuff too, it reminded me of like an old man that's used to the old ways of how the law firm should be
yes, an
ran.
old
Like,
white man. Yeah.
yes, yes. I also find it dumb on Adam's part because in the scene he sends Sarah flowers to her office, and the note on the flower says, "Sarah, it's always been you." And to me, that kind of like hints, well, has there been a question? Like
Yeah, I
even
agree.
not aside from her knowing about this whole affair and all that, a little fishy on that end. It just
I agree.
I feel like there was an open ending thing, which of course we know that it was kind of an open ending thing that he wasn't saying, but it
I
was
forgot about that. She should have used that to make the cops even more suspicious. That would have made it look like he murdered Kelly and then sent her flowers to say it's always been you.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So in this chapter, we also meet Matthew, which is her best friend from law school, and he's there on business, which he ends up being roped into Adam's whole situation. But he shows up and I don't think he really likes Adam, to be
No.
honest. He starts making jabs towards him instantly. It's a cute little relationship that Matthew and her have, which I personally felt like it could have been maybe Anne or Matthew as some options. I did feel like maybe Matthew could have been the person because she does make a comment at some point that he would do anything for her, no questions asked. So I felt that he could have possibly been the
Yeah, those were your
killer.
big
And
3,
too,
weren't it? Anne, Sarah, and Matthew?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Matthew came later in the story because that comment later on when she asked him to get information for her. But the first three, for at least the first couple chapters, was the brother that they mentioned lightly, the Sarah, and then Anne. We didn't know that the brother was Bob until the end, but
Two were
spoiler.
Sarah and the husband.
Adam.
No, Kelly's husband.
Oh, yeah, yeah. See, I felt like there was something else going on with that just because of the way he reacted to the whole situation. I felt like that it was probably not as likely it was him. He seemed way too passionate that she had passed away and he wanted to find the killer.
It's also very convenient that your husband is allegedly an abuser and then you kind of set him up for murder. That'd be a very
Mhm.
convenient thing. So I thought this seems too obvious, but he was also very violent.
In the next chapter, we end up where Adam's waking up, starting his morning, and there's a knock on the door, and he opens up, and it's the deputies coming to arrest him for suspicion of murder. When they come to the door, they don't even tell him exactly why they're there.
Mm-mm. No, that's why he
They,
reacts badly and they
yeah,
flip him.
he's basically asking all the questions like, is something wrong with my wife? What happened to my wife?
Yeah, he thinks it's about
All
Sarah.
that. Yeah, and they end up tackling him to the ground because he's panicking, trying to get to his phone to call his wife and make sure that she's okay. And of course, we end up finding out that they work with the husband of the girl that was murdered. So they're definitely crossing some boundaries of some legal laws that of how
Oh,
to handle the situation.
absolutely. And the partner of the husband, he was suspicious to me the whole time. And I'm still not sure he wasn't doing something, but we don't ever learn anything about him. He was way too passionate about Kelly,
So when we get back to the station, he sits in the room and he's sitting there for 2 hours, it says. So the sheriff ends up
which
coming
is,
in
I'm just
and
going to say,
questioning
it's
him.
really short. Most people
Yes.
would sweat it out for like 12, 14, 16 hours. They would have let him sweat, let me tell you. Also, I just want to say this. I never once thought Adam did it.
I just based it off how he worded things. I did not think he did it
His
either.
reaction was
Um,
so genuine, which I
yeah.
also thought that about Sarah when she puked when she found out too, but she's obviously a better actress than Adam because I think Adam's too stupid to figure out that he should have been playing along the whole time. But anyways,
I really felt like the sheriff was a little too aggressive with the questioning. But of course, we end up finding out that none of this was really argued in the courtroom, even though we don't exactly know what ends up being said. But I do think that how he reacted to the line of questioning pretty much solidified to me he did not do it. And whenever the husband comes in and starts beating him up, from that reaction, did not think it was him that did it either,
agree.
because they both seem very genuine with their reactions. But I did definitely think it was somebody around Sarah for sure, or around Kelly. So then oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I thought it was interesting. It talks about how him and Kelly had rough sex the night before she was murdered, and on the flip side, it talks about how vanilla his and Sarah's sex life was.
It was just very millennial slang of you.
Sorry, we even breezed past the bruises. It says some of the bruises were days old. It doesn't tell us what that was. It never goes into those details. That didn't make sense to me.
My thing, once we find out that it was the sheriff and the husband's DNA along with Adam's, we still didn't get the answer of the question whether or not it was the sheriff or her husband that was abusing her, because her husband seemed kind of clueless. So was it the sheriff doing all that? But then you would think that she would go back to her husband and he would see her
With
with
bruises,
bruises. But you
exactly.
also think you would think that if the sheriff is also her side guy, that he would also see those things.
It was
But
never
maybe that was her.
answered. It was never solved.
Yeah. There was a couple questions related to details of the case that I never did get any answers to.
Well, that's also
Um,
like, okay, but the fact that he got let out,
yeah.
he might not be a flight risk, but there's another aspect to that. It's called a danger to society. And when you
Mhm.
stab someone 35 times, I guarantee you they're going to think you're a danger to society.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I get that that added to the plot of the story, but there were several plot holes that bothered me throughout.
Well, to me, the flightless risk alone, I mean, they're talking about how wealthy Sarah is.
Hmm.
I mean, the flight risk, I feel like, was billionaire status
It's
almost.
the way they confined him to the lake house, to the scene of the murder.
Yeah, that was weird to me too.
What?
Yes.
What? I was shook.
Yes. Well, not only that, but I feel like especially whenever the sheriff brings Sarah back to the station, which Sarah ends up representing Adam, and so she
His
asks to go
reaction
see
to
the.
that too is what solidified for me that it wasn't Adam. The way he reacted to
Mhm.
Sarah having to find out and represent him, all those sorts of things solidified for me that it wasn't Adam.
Yes. So through all of this, she ends up asking to go see the lake house and the scene of the crime to see if there was anything out of place, which makes sense.
Except
Um,
it doesn't if
but
she's
I
never been there.
Well, yes, but it makes sense as far as up to this point. I don't really know if they know that she's gone there often or once in a while,
Yeah.
but I just find it odd that she finds all this stuff, which I mean, granted, now we know after, but in the moment, I was just like, why in the world did they not take the stuff that they drank out of to test it? Like, why did they not find this hidden drawer in this desk with secret things?
But also, if she's not hardly ever there, then how would she know there would be something in the secret drawer unless she planted it?
Well, I think she said that she bought that desk for him,
She
so
did, but
that's how
that
she knew
doesn't
there
mean
was.
there would actually be something in there.
Yeah.
And conveniently, it's a photo of his affair with a threatening note on the
Mhm.
back.
Yeah.
Planted. Also, I was shocked that his drug screen came back and didn't show that she had also drugged him. She thinks, at the end, I think Sarah says that the sheriff must have messed that up or covered it up on purpose. But I found that interesting because why would the sheriff mess with that? Because here's my
Um,
thing, even if he had been drugged, we know he woke up at some point to leave the house. So easily the state could argue he might have been drugged, but we have confirmation that he left in the middle of the night, which means he was awake and able to stab her. Like if he could drive home, he
mhm.
could stab someone. You know what I'm saying? So it really
Yeah.
didn't like sink the case or anything. So it just doesn't make sense to me why the sheriff would go out of his way to do that. I don't know. It was weird. Did
Well,
the
and
sheriff
in
know that she was also sleeping with Adam? Or did the sheriff think he was the only guy? I don't know. I have a lot of unanswered questions.
well, I'm sure once he started figuring out a little bit of it that he knew he wasn't the only one, but
Well,
I
I'm
don't know
sure
in the
when he found
moment
out
he
she
if he
was
did or not.
murdered, he knew, but I just didn't know like before
Well,
then.
see, I did suspect at some point that the sheriff was involved in it with her just because of how flirty he was with Sarah. I thought maybe it was a possibility that they were something side for a little bit.
I literally
Um,
texted you and said, "Was she having an affair with the sheriff?"
yes. So, but then after he started flirting with the secretary and stuff, I was kind of like, maybe not.
Yeah.
But we do get end up a scene where sheriff is giving all the details to Sarah, and he says the victim's name is Kelly Summers, age 27. She's found this morning at approximately 9:15 a.m. by a cleaning woman by the name of Sonia. Kelly was found dead in bed at Adam and I guess your bed at the lake house in Prince William County. She'd been stabbed 37 times in the neck, chest, and torso. Due to how gruesome this murder was, it would appear a crime of passion. There are no defensive wounds, which tells us that she was asleep when it occurred. Her eyes were wide open when she was found, which tells us that she had woken during the stabbing. A toxicology report is being done, and we believe she had drugs in her system, which would explain why she didn't wake right away. A preliminary autopsy found semen in her mouth, vagina, and anus. There is bruising on her right shoulder, but that appears to have been caused at least a day or two before. She had a couple of small tears in her anus and vagina, which would insinuate rape or rough sex. They found skin underneath her fingernails. That's all we have as of now.
Why didn't they test the skin under her fingernails? And if they found
Well,
skin, that could have been fighting back. They don't know.
well, I mean, to be though, it was more than likely probably Adam's DNA under her fingernails because of the rough sex they had.
Oh, absolutely. I wholeheartedly don't think that she actually got her attacker. But from an investigative point of view, you should have tested the skin to see if it was Adam's. That would have added more to the case. Because if she's being attacked and she's drugged, and the only thing she can do is scratch her nails, she might have gotten her killer. What do we know?
Mhm.
And Adam has no scratches on his face or anything. I would imagine it probably was back or something from during sex.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't know that for sure. You should confirm
Mhm.
that. You know what I'm saying? It shouldn't just be a theory. There was a lot.
There was the loss of missing pieces, which I feel like was just because the sheriff was not wanting to get implemented in any way. But
But I would think he would want every single little piece. A, because if he was sleeping with this married woman whose husband works for him, You'd think you'd at least care about her in some sense. And if he cares about her, then you would think he'd want to get her justice for her, whoever her murderer is. Or on the flip side, get as much evidence against somebody else so it doesn't point at him.
Can I ask you why that possibly the brother wasn't upset with the sheriff for sleeping with her?
What
Or
brother?
like trying to get back with the sheriff? Well, not her brother, but the first husband's brother. Like he chose Adam and Adam's lake house to kill her at rather
I
than
think that only happened. I think he only chose Adam because it connected to Sarah. I don't think
okay.
he cared who went down for it. I think he just wanted to kill her. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
Also, I don't know if anybody else knew about the affair with the sheriff. I don't know if anybody else ever caught that except for Sarah.
Yeah.
But I thought at one point I thought maybe it was the partner. Deputy Hudson is his name. I thought it might have been him at one point. He was very passionate about Kelly. He probably wanted to sleep with her.
Yeah. So this chapter goes into the details where Sarah is questioning Adam about how he met Kelly.
What
And we end up
happened?
finding out that they end up meeting about a year and a half prior to her getting murdered. And she says, you had sex with her the first day you met. And aside from the fact that she's involved in the situation, I really have to applaud her from trying to separate her personal feelings from the attorney feelings.
Well, I gave her that
Um,
credit too when I first read it, and then I thought about it and realized that she's known for quite some time, so she's probably already processed those personal feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Although
but to
she's good
hear
at
the
faking it.
details coming out of your husband's mouth, I feel like it still would put some salt in the wound, even if the wound is healed. To me, to hear that out of your own husband's mouth, how much you love this woman, how great she was, I'm sure that she probably wished you heard from him towards her because they haven't had the greatest close knit relationship lately.
You don't also know at that point that she's having an affair herself and has
Yes.
plotted to set him up. So I feel like,
Honestly, we don't know she's having an affair until the very end,
yeah.
but
So I feel like even if she hasn't worked through those personal feelings, they're probably at like the level of revenge and anger. So it's easy to. I think it probably helped solidify what she was doing. I don't think that's right, but that's probably how she took it. She was just like, "Yeah, this is
Mhm.
exactly why I'm setting you up," kind of thing. But I
So
would have been able to keep it separate. I can tell you that. I would have been hot to trot.
well, I put it in my notes after the end of the chapter because we end up getting Kelly's husband that comes and attacks Adam while she's questioning him, and
And her. See, that's
yeah,
what made me doubt him for a minute there. I was like, when he hit Sarah, that changed it a little bit for me.
we end
Adam
up
was a
getting to
weak little
where
thing, though.
I imagined him that way, like a
He's an
little like.
artist. He's soft.
Well, no, I just imagined him as like some little nerdy guy that had little glasses.
Yes, I agree. I think he is like a cardigan wearing glasses. Not like
Hmm.
a guy that you're gonna catch fighting in the street or in a bar. I agree.
Yeah.
You can tell that by the way that he just sits there and lets dude pummel him.
Well, and I put in my notes that I thought that because they were associated with the husband, that that's why they were trying to pin it on Adam. It was their buddy and they didn't really feel like he could commit murder. So I felt like that was the reason in the moment whenever I was reading it
Yeah.
of why I even wrote Sarah believes the sheriff is really trying to figure out who did kill Kelly. And which in the moment she does say that she really felt like a sheriff was really behind her and was really trying and to get to the bottom of it. And the thing that bothered me is there was some scenes where it really seemed like he was really into it, and then there's other scenes where he seemed very cold, and even Sarah pointed that out. Like one minute he's really hot and really on the case and really trying, and the next minute he's not. So that kind of confused me a little bit because I don't get it. Like if he was involved in the situation, why is he having all this back and forth?
The same way that Sarah put on a fake facade and played a character, played a role, I think he was doing the same thing. And I think those
That's
cold
fair.
moments is probably the real him.
That's possible.
Because if you seem so invested in finding her murderer, then who would ever think that it could have been you?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I will say, the way that Adam obsessed over not only Kelly, but when he gets released, he obsesses over the sheriff and Sarah and these little flirty moments they have. And he is like
Hmm.
obsessing over it. So I think there's more to poor little Adam.
Hmm.
I think because again, coming back to mentioning that he's rough with Kelly, that kept coming back to me, and then the jealousy and the obsession, it made me start to wonder, maybe it was Adam. Maybe Adam has a temper that we don't know about. Maybe he's never
Mhm.
shown that side to Sarah, but that doesn't mean he hasn't attacked other people or things like that too. But we find out that's not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe doubt. Which is the whole point, obviously.
There was a lot of back and forth. I was sold on one person for a couple of chapters, then the next chapter, something would deter for me to go to somebody else, and I mean, there was a lot of people that was back and forth, but I would say for majority of the book, I was dead set on it was Sarah, Matthew, or Anne, and it just stayed at those couple for majority of the book. Especially Anne, I really felt like Anne was definitely involved, which she was to an extent.
Which I still don't know if I believe what she claimed it was, honestly. I don't know. You catch them, but you
I
don't
think
you threaten them, but you don't actually follow through on the threat. I don't know.
I felt like there was a little something there that she had feelings towards Sarah for sure.
I agree. Which, if that's the case, then why wouldn't you jump at the chance to tell her that her husband's cheating on her? You can be the shoulder she cries on. I don't know. You know what I'm
Maybe she
saying?
didn't want to hurt her.
Oh, oh, too bad.
So after Adam's beat up, he's in the hospital and he's trying to get a hold of Sarah and can't reach her.
He calls
And
his
he,
mommy.
yes, he calls his mother. So he sits there and
That's
he sort of has a flashback into whenever Kelly had shown up to his door with broken and
yeah,
beaten face. He's asking who did this. She says it's Scott. And I do think it's a possibility because of his anger and how quick he is to anger that it is a possibility that he was the one that did that to her.
I agree.
Because it's never investigated fully, I don't know. But
It's another
I
thing
would
that
say, based on all the evidence that's presented, though, it's more than likely it was him.
unless she was doing it to
And I
herself because she's psychotic.
that's a possibility as well.
Isn't that
I
the scene
do,
where he finds out that her name is not her real name?
yes. And she didn't murder her previous husband. Yeah.
Double
I
hand.
don't
She
know if
murdered that man.
I don't know if I believe that.
I don't believe it. I know I don't believe it. She murdered that
I
man.
and
And I think
and
Scott destroyed evidence and helped her get away with it, which then makes me believe he is very shady.
yes. Well, not only that, but to help her relocate to a different state, change her name,
And you're a police
all
officer?
that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. They're both very shady characters.
Yes.
But if that is the
Um,
case, if Scott was abusing her then now the second time, why did he feel so sympathy for her the first time if he's the same kind of man? And also, if Scott was abusing her, how come the sheriff never saw it and never asked about it? If she told Adam, she would have told the sheriff in theory. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't a secret per se. If she showed up to work every day with bruises, I feel like when they interviewed her coworkers, that would have been mentioned. Things like that. Like,
well, my biggest thing is to me it really did stand out that the sheriff did not care about her that much and it was mainly just like a hookup for him because
maybe.
if you really did care, like Adam for example, his reaction whenever she showed up to his door, beaten and everything, he was like, "Oh my god, we got to find out who did this. We got to report this. We got to do something." And instead the sheriff didn't really seem like that because I feel like there would have been a report or he would have fired. The only time he ever mentions he really had a problem with the husband is whenever he was meeting with Adam at the hospital and said, "Yeah, I never really liked him either."
He's just sleeping with his
But
wife, naturally.
yes. So, I mean, there was no other indication.
But it doesn't make
So,
sense to me. If Adam and Kelly were having such a little love affair, why would she also be having a hookup with the sheriff? Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't connect for me how that is even a plausible storyline. I don't know.
do you want my honest opinion?
Well, also because if they found semen, 3 sets inside of her, that means it had to be within, like, a couple of days, which means
So,
she got all of them
I
very,
think
very
she was
close together.
I think she was hooking up with the sheriff because she had planned to do the same thing to her husband that she did with her previous
So you thought she was gonna murder
husband.
Scott.
Yes. I think she had the same scheme and Adam I think she generally did care about and that was kind of a curveball for her that she didn't expect to come along.
I think she's psychotic.
I mean, it's highly possible.
I think she
But
is a danger to society.
I think she saw Sheriff, he was very flirty, he was very eager to I imagine him as some heavyset guy that, doesn't really get a whole lot of action,
Oh, that's not how I
just
pictured him
because
at
of how
all.
he Oh, really?
I pictured him as a man that gets plenty of action. He seemed awful flirty, and everybody that talked
Well,
about
I
him was
I
like, Sarah says he's attractive.
Well, I just didn't imagine him as something. It just seemed was so desperate for attention. It just, to me, it seemed like somebody that didn't get a whole lot of action, that he thought he was some big stuff to, I don't know, in his own way, brag about himself kind of thing.
He seemed like a
But
player to me, like somebody that's not gonna settle
that
down,
too.
but would love to
Yeah, I
sleep
could see that
around.
perspective. But anyways, I thought that she probably flirted with him back so that way they could get in the same kind of scheme that she had with her husband.
I think
But if
she's
he had hopes
crazy,
that
and
she'd
I
stick
think she's
around.
been playing everybody this whole time.
I
I
mean,
feel
I really did think that quite a bit.
she probably was hitting herself. I would not make that accusation lightly. What it seems though is that she was setting up everybody around her.
So we then end up meeting Adam's mother, and instantly, I mean, I don't think she's worth a lot of time, but she was.
I don't get the role she serves in the whole thing, to be honest with you.
I think it's just for the ending, to be honest,
When they're at the actual scene and she tells her ha ha essentially.
pretty much.
I will say, even then I don't think that adds really to the story. It's a good little dang, but it doesn't really add to the story.
I mean, other than the fact that the only part that I took from it is that she enabled him a lot. He's been coddled his whole life. We end up getting where she goes out to the lake house and she's looking around and she ends up finding the picture, which says "end it or I will" on the back of it. And we end up finding out later on that it was her secretary that sent this letter.
How did Sarah not recognize Anne's handwriting?
She said she did at the end. She said something along the lines of, "Did you really think that I wouldn't recognize my own secretary's handwriting?"
That was when I started to think maybe it was Sarah.
So we get to the point where during one of their meetings as attorney client, Sarah says that basically his possible penalty for the crime that he's being accused of, because we end up finding out that Kelly was pregnant, so it ends up becoming a double homicide, that execution is the ultimate punishment for that. Which, as soon as that was said, I was like, oh, somebody's being executed for this. There's no way it couldn't be. So then we end up finding out that there's three sets of DNA. One's Adam's, one's Scott's, and one's unknown, which we end up finding out it's the sheriff's.
To
And
me, like to find out that Adam was the dad of the baby, supposedly. No one even said that an actual test was done. They just said, Adam, you're the dad of the baby.
well, the thing too is officers' DNA not in the system?
It is not. That's a good question. I believe fingerprints are, but I don't believe DNA is. Because when I did the program in Arkansas, they fingerprinted me. So, like, my fingerprints are in the Arkansas database should I ever commit a crime in Arkansas. But
Well,
they
wouldn't
don't
you
do
think
DNA
that they
tests.
would, so that way they make sure they're not hiring a unknown serial killer?
You would think. I think everybody should be in the system, but that's kind of an
Well,
extreme
especially
view.
it's a public servant of some kind. You would think that they would be like, "Hey, we need to collect your DNA to just know that you're not a secret serial killer out here that has been getting away." Because also getting into that position, if they are a serial killer, would just further be able to
Well,
commit crimes and cover it up.
I think it should be like a rite of passage. Like when you turn a certain age, you have to go get your DNA added to the system because most people, first of all,
Honestly, I'm
work
shocked
in.
that they don't take that at the hospital, to be honest, whenever you're born.
Yeah, well, I don't know my own blood type,
I don't either.
and my DNA is in 23andMe, and they can send a subpoena to those companies and get DNA for somebody in particular if they know
Mhm.
it's not as simple as it sounds.
Well, and we don't ever really know anything. We end up finding out that in Anne and Sarah's conversation about the whole case, she ends up saying that previous husband of Kelly was stabbed to death, and she ended up getting off because evidence went missing during the trial, and the arresting officer was none other than her husband. Then we end up going into a conversation between Adam's mom and him, and she's basically nonchalant about the whole situation, which really made me even more mad about her in general, because it was just nonchalant of, "Oh, well, you cheated, but that's okay, honey. I mean, it's Sarah that was the problem. She should have given you more attention. Sarah was the reason why you end up cheating. It wasn't you that chose
It's
to
absolutely
go out, be out
ridiculous.
with somebody." There was the justification behind her justification was just out of this world. I mean, I don't know. I just don't understand. No matter how much you love, how how you could justify something like that. Like maybe your wife was not giving you attention. Why would you not be trying to swooning your wife to get that attention or something?
Well,
You know what I mean?
and the way she was like, it's Sarah's fault, not only for not being a good wife, but because she didn't give her grandchildren. Like, not
Mhm.
even just to Adam, but now to the mother as well. Like,
Yes.
no wonder he complained all the time. And no wonder Sarah
Mhm.
ended up killing him because she was tired of hearing it.
Mhm.
These people.
So we kind of get a conversation between Scott and Adam whenever he's in a jail cell. This really, to me, then
It was
the
weird.
conversation, it was weird, but it made me not suspect Scott of anything. He just didn't seem. He seemed really like generally like, did you kill her? No. Okay, well, I didn't kill her either. So let's get to the bottom of this. Let's work together to try to. And
I thought
I
he
just
was
don't
trying to set
understand
Adam
how.
up. That's the way I read it.
Well, after finding out he hired the PI to look into him, I do agree with that. But in the moment,
I thought he didn't
I
hire the PI. I thought Sarah and Bob hired her to pretend like Scott hired her.
I thought it ended up coming back where it was Scott, and then they intervened with her and told her to keep him on a track.
I thought they hired her. I don't know.
I don't know. We'll get to that point here in just a bit, so I can kind of clarify that.
It was
But
definitely shady. Him coming in there, talking to him one on one, it seemed very much like trying to get you to confess to another inmate so they can testify against you and be an informant. I didn't like that vibe.
now that you say that, that definitely does seem like a possibility of the way that it was going.
Well, and the fact is that
Um,
happens so often. That might be why I went to that resort, but that's how I got it. It felt like Scott was trying to get him to slip up and say something and tell him something that he shouldn't have known or whatever. And Adam is just an idiot and going along with it and talking to Scott as if Scott cares a single thing about him. I was like, "You're a
mhm.
moron."
Well, and we
Let me
also
just say
get
this.
where.
Don't talk to nobody, okay? Don't talk to the police. Don't talk to anybody else. Keep your mouth shut and get an attorney, okay? Okay, thank you.
So we get to the scene where she gets an offer from the prosecution to plea, and she's basically telling him like, hey, it's 25 years with no possibility of parole or the death penalty. And I don't feel like she gave the best legal advice with that, which, knowing what we know now, and she was behind it, understandably why. But I feel like she should have just been like, hey, this whole trial, it's not looking good for you. It's probably going to go the opposite way. 25 years is nothing. Even if you're not guilty, it's a better option.
Well, she
Um,
told him, he said, "What would you do as my attorney? And what would you do as my wife?" And he
mhm,
went with her wife answer. He should have went with her
yes.
attorney answer. He might have seen the
Well,
light of
and
day
not,
again if he'd done that.
but she's probably salty because you cheated on him as your wife. So, like,
Exactly. Go with her lawyer answer. I mean,
yes.
I understand. He knew he was innocent and he thought that would prevail in his trial. However, it's a very real possibility, and innocent people do go to prison. So I think that's something that he was just ignorant to, and I don't think
Mhm.
he wanted to accept that was a possibility, because had he known that, I think he probably would have taken the deal.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, if he was convicted, he was getting the death penalty. There was no way around that. Anybody that hears
Yes.
that you killed a pregnant woman, come on, dude. You know that.
So we do then end up getting where Sarah basically takes it upon herself to start investigating the case.
Which was also
Because the
slacking.
yes. So because the officers basically have decided that they're not it's a closed case, and
This would not have gone as quick as it did. There's no way.
I definitely think she played the speedy trial thing for sure.
Well, and so Discovery, we don't really even talk about what she got from the state, what evidence they were going to put on, who they're going to call for a witness, none of that. I found interesting. The fact that they never found the murder weapon, she kind of breezed past that and never really talked about that, and that's kind of important. So, I don't know. There wasn't even a theory. They didn't even say, oh, he tossed it in the lake, just to throw out some weak theory. I really wish we would have gotten more of the trial. I understand that makes a very long book, though. But I don't know. I just feel like something, I don't know. Her opening statement, though, as soon as she said, her fifth fact, that she knew for a fact he did not do it. I was like, that means she did it, or she knows at least who did do it. So,
Mhm.
because obviously she wouldn't know for a fact unless she knew somebody else that had done it.
Well, and we get to where we end up finding out that there was a stalker of sorts of Kelly, and
Yes,
she
that is
starts
name.
kind of investigating that a little bit, Jesse Hook, which was just a weird thing, I feel like, to throw us off a little bit
Yeah.
again to who it was. I don't feel like it was super precedent to the story other than the fact that it was trying to throw us off the case.
But it was also, like, over and done really quick, and Jesse's here and gone. I would have
Yes.
drug it out a little bit more and made it seem more like, for example, I probably would have written it in a way that, like, we didn't find Jesse for several chapters, and then there were, like, other little
Mhm.
things that kept adding up to it might be Jesse, and things like that.
We end up to the point where we meet Rebecca Stanford, which I'm going to talk about her a little bit because I do think she plays a good drift into the story. But she claims that she's a reporter from a magazine. After Adam gets out on bail and he ends up confined to the lake house, she shows up at his door, which I feel like if it was being monitored by the police, I feel like there should have been, especially with the severity of the crime, I feel like there should have been some kind of like police, because I imagine this lake house at the end of a dead end road and at least an officer or something monitoring who's coming and going from his place because of the severity of the crime in this small town. But
No, they're monitoring his ankle bracelet where he goes, but they don't monitor other people.
I just, to me, it
If you
just
go
because
up to a murderer's door, you understand that you're risking the fact that you might be next.
I also find it really weird that he instantly trusted this woman and was like, my
Yes.
wife it cannot help, which I do feel like was smart on his part, where he's like, I can't trust my wife to give me all this stuff, so you go do this. So I feel like there's a little bit of a gut feeling there that he
Except he
kind of felt
also
like,
didn't read what she did give him.
yes,
So how can you say she's not giving you anything when you haven't read what she has given you?
it's true. But
Which
I
you
do
did
feel
point
like
that
it
out
was
to
his
me
gut.
because I at first was like, "Well, she's not communicating with him," and you're like, "She gave him an entire box of things he didn't even look at." I was like, "That's a good point. That did happen."
I mean, she did, but I do feel like it was his gut speaking something there, where he's just like, oh, well, I'm going to trust you instead of my wife to get all this stuff.
That
But
was
I do feel like
another,
he
like,
became,
Adam is so full of himself, and he liked the attention of this other young girl. That's how I took it.
I mean, we do end up finding out that he tries to kiss her, which I feel like moved really quickly compared to they didn't really ever talk about themselves. It was always about his murder mistress. We get to the kind of a scene where she stops by the lake house, Sarah does, to drop off the information with him, and he tries to seduce her while she's there, and she basically says, hey, I can't do this yet, like we're not at a level to do this. But I do find that really weird of him, like you're on trial for murder and your wife is trying to defend you. I mean, and not only that, but she just found out you're cheating and you're trying to seduce her. It
Weird.
was a weird part to try to do all that. But I mean, sometimes not rational when they decide that they want to get frisky, I guess. But it confused me tremendously.
I agree. And then he was almost put off by her reaction too. He almost was like, "Well, are we ever going to be the same?" Like he almost wanted her to answer and justify it, even though he was the one that caused the whole rift in the first place.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
was weird.
And then we get a little bit of a conversation between him and his editor,
That whole part of the book, that whole part of the book too, makes no sense to me.
agent. Yeah.
Evidently, he wrote one great book. We know nothing about it, but it really was a good book. And now his agent wants him to write about the murder case as it's pending. He wouldn't be able to publish that until afterwards. And from a logistical standpoint, no, no, no. You should not be writing a book because even like same thing. Why I said don't talk to the police. Anything you say can be twisted. You might think you're saying something and like even saying I
Well, it's like
didn't
the
do it.
letter.
Yeah, exactly. Just like the letter. Like you meant one thing and it's complete 180. So you can't run that risk if you are actively trying to fight it or appeal it. So it was a little strange to me to add that in there.
But
Zoom
what,
out.
did he really think that he was going to possibly have a chance of getting out? Because I mean, she did say that he did go through the Innocence Project to try to get released, so maybe he had held out for hope that he would end up finding somebody that would take his case to get him off on it. I don't know. I feel like he was really holding on to hope still with the divorce
Weird.
So we get to the part where Anna's talking to Sarah, and this is where I started to believe it was possibly Matthew because Anne makes the comment that I swear he has a thing for you. And Sarah says he's gay, and Anne replies with, yeah, but he'd be straight for you. And I just kind of with those jabs a little bit here and there about him, and then at some point Sarah makes the comment that he would do anything for her. It really made me start questioning whether or not he would actually do something for Sarah on her behalf, or his idea of the best interest for Sarah, whether she asked him to or not. But I
Well, that
definitely felt
little
like there was a possibility.
yeah, and I was gonna say that little jab by Anne about Matthew made me more suspicious of Anne too. Because to say that he's gonna change his whole sexuality because Sarah finally gives him the time of day, even though she actually probably gives him more attention than she does her husband already, was just a little strange to me. Like, it almost sounded like jealousy rather than you know what I mean? I don't know.
So we end up finding out that Rebecca comes back with a list of phone numbers to the possibility of who Kelly's ex-husband's brother could be.
It made no sense to me when we find out later on that she was actually hired by them.
Yes.
Why would she put
Um,
Bob's name on there?
but then did he know that she gave him a list with his name on it?
I don't know. I do know that when he answered the phone call in that scene, I knew immediately that it was him.
Mhm, yeah.
I was like, "Adam just called him. Oh my gosh, like, what we just so Bob's connected to this all?" And then I thought maybe at that point, I still didn't know anything about Sarah and Bob. I thought at that point that Bob was using Adam to punish Sarah and Kelly. Punish them both, I guess, but I don't know, it was weird. Isn't it the
Um,
scene where he rubs her hand?
I think so.
That was I was like, "Why is he touching her?" Ugh. It was weird. That made me suspicious then. That's when I was like, "Maybe we don't really know what's going on."
Yeah, it just kinda threw me because of the jerk angle that he played at the beginning of the book. It threw me for a loop a lot with that.
I guess, again,
I
that was a fake
it
facade. That was him playing a role so that nobody in the office would think they're connected, maybe. I don't know.
yeah, it was odd for me
Then she feels
to
okay,
switch to that.
this is jumping all around, but I also thought it was odd when he gets interviewed by the sheriff and the sheriff pushes about his dead brother. And she kinda defends Bob a little bit. I thought, "That is the strangest thing."
That was the only one instance because I didn't really the hand thing, I got it, but I just thought, "Oh, he had a minute of compassion," like, he really
That's
wasn't
my
as
aversion to
hard as
touch
he was
probably
coming
coming out.
across.
Because if you rubbed my
But
hand, I would literally back away like, "What are you doing?"
the defending him in the interview thing, I think I even wrote down somewhere, like, why would she defend him? It was a weird
Yeah.
response. I think in that scene, I really thought she was with the sheriff, kind of cahoodles with him, so that's kind of where I was going with it.
Yeah.
So we end up getting to an interview with Jesse, which didn't really uncover too much more than he was following her around, but he believed that there was this friendship thing. Turns out the DNA doesn't match to him because
That doesn't
he
mean she
wasn't
wasn't
involved
also
with
sleeping with
her.
him.
I mean, it's a possibility, but she did get around, so it's a possibility.
I'm telling you, she was setting everybody up in her life. I mean, like, what the heck?
Or she was maybe just trying to find the right people to do the right thing at the certain time or something.
I don't know, but I wouldn't trust her.
So then we end up finding out that Anne is spying on Adam and everything he's doing on behalf of Sarah.
Don't think she was
So
spying on him. I think she happened to go take pictures and happened to catch him. But it doesn't
no,
appear
this
that
is
she
whenever
can
she texts Sarah while she was in Jesse's interview, and she says, Adam had a redhead over today, not
Oh,
sure who she is. Adam spent $10,000 in a mattress and bedding store. Apparently, she's a reporter. Adam has made 22 phone calls and at 22 different phone numbers in the past 24 hours. So she's basically
monitoring him. Yeah,
spying.
gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. I thought you meant when she took the
Um,
photo.
so that's whenever Sarah goes to the lake house to confront Adam about all of this stuff and ask him what in the world's going on. He says, "Hey, I don't think you're doing a good job of investigating this." And she's like, "Oh, really? Well, who's Jesse? Do you know who Jesse is?" And he's like, "I don't know Jesse." So starts questioning him on what in the world this reporter's doing, what she's trying to help him with. He's basically saying, "I'm trying to come up with my own investigation." And
Again, anything he said to her could have been used against him. He's an idiot.
So then we also end up finding out that he tells her that he's making a book, and he seems kind of like a jerk about it. Like, there's already a bidding war for my book, is a comment that he makes. And
It's his ego. I'm telling you, that was his downfall.
it
Man.
really was. I do think the one thing his mother had right was, oh, you really need to get a different attorney other than your wife. And I think that was the one smart thing that she actually had to say towards most of the conversation.
It's probably, though, there's a reference that she had a consult with a couple other attorneys and nobody wanted to take his case. That
Yeah.
might be true. She might have tried, and everybody else said, "I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole."
But I do feel like if somebody else would have taken the case, they would have been kind of more suspicious of, oh, the sheriff's not investigating this to its fullest extent. There's
I
some
agree.
information that's not really adding up. So I feel if that was the case and she wasn't getting those responses, that it probably would have helped him get away with it, or find out actually who did it, I guess I should say.
They have that much money. They probably could have found someone to take the case.
Yes. So then after they go through the list and supposedly does not find anybody, which we end up finding out he does talk to actually Bob, and it's actually Kelly's ex-husband's brother.
Were you shook that Adam did not realize who Bob was still?
No, because of them talking about how distanced their relationship is, I didn't see him like going to office functions or things like that with her, or
Oh,
even if he
see, I
did,
did.
he well, I imagine if he did, it was kind of just show his face, and he kind of sat in a corner. He doesn't seem like one of those people that mingle with people and really have those kind of conversations. She does, but I would imagine him just being dragged along next to her as she's chit-chatting with her coworkers. So to me personally, I don't like the social events, and so if Trevor does something like that, I'm not really paying attention to who we're talking to if I'm not interested in the conversation, because I want to get the soonest exit out of the building. So
But so just a regular employee that she works with, I don't think that would. But the fact that there's such tension between her and Bob, I feel like that's like her enemy. It's made out to be like their enemies or whatever at work. And so I feel like there would have been some sort of mention of look, Bob's here. Or I don't know, like something that would have cued him to know there was animosity, and then Bob would have like stuck out in his brain, I thought. That's what I kept thinking.
it's a possibility, but it really, to me, the way that the relationship was reflected was there wasn't that small talk between the two of them. It was like ships in the night passing by kind of relationship. I don't really get that it was more, let me tell you about my day, and oh my gosh, Bob was just absolutely ridiculous today. And I didn't get that kind of vibe just by the way they described their relationship. So we get to the point where Adam finally decides to go through the box that Sarah brought him with Rebecca, and he ends up seeing a sticky note on the top and realizes that the handwriting on the sticky note is the same as the note that he had received. So he decides to grab Rebecca's keys and go fly to the office, which broke his whole thing.
Idiot again.
And yes, and confront Anne, which he really thought he had something there. I give him that. He really
He
thought this
really
was going to be
thought.
like, yeah, he was going to show up and be like, see, here you go, here's your suspect. And it didn't end that way at all.
No, even once he got there and then also recognized Bob finally and realized that he had called Bob and he called him out too, even after potentially pointing out two more suspects, it still didn't go in Adam's favor.
Yes. And I also found it super suspicious in that moment whenever Sarah basically starts defending Anne, like, you can't just arrest her, she has rights. And even though, yes, that's probably the case, but I mean, if you really thought your husband was innocent and you're not in on it with Anne, why are you basically standing up for her? Because honestly, I don't know if the sheriff really knew the laws or not at this point. So he could have taken her and at least questioned her, which he did end up inviting them to come to the office to be interview both Bob and Anne. So we end up getting into the interview with Anne, and
I really thought she'd have been a little tougher than she was. I guess maybe because she didn't do anything, maybe that's why she wasn't defensive, but she was too easy.
She was a little bit, and that's again, I kind of thought that it was just a little easy that she was really milking that she wasn't involved so that way she would get off on it. Because I really, at this point in the book, I really thought Anne was a possibility because of the handwriting match. But I also, again, I question why she didn't say anything to Sarah and why she didn't ever disclose it to her.
That's what I kept coming
Um,
back to. The "tell her or I will" indicates that it's a threat to expose your affair, and who knows how long ago that photo was sent. It wasn't the last week or so. She's known for some time, looked at her every single day, and hasn't told her the truth. And then to be so obsessed with her and then not tell her, it just didn't add up to me. It was very suspicious, and the thought that maybe Anne and Sarah, like, went to have drinks, Anne confessed she knew about it, and then they went to the lake house and murdered her. That was kind of the theory I was working on for a little bit.
that was the theory that I had in this part because I was like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense that she didn't say anything to her. And then like maybe she said something to her, they concocted something and they were each other's alibis, like that would make sense. Um but I don't know. There's just again, there wasn't much investigation on the sheriff's part for us to really get solidified answers into a lot of it because he wasn't really willing to investigate too much.
No, he believed
Um
everything Anne said. For some reason, he had a suspicion of Bob, though.
yeah.
I think that was just a man
Um
thing. Again,
I
ego.
think that was a little bit of a I don't really think it was ego. I think it was something to do with
Testosterone.
the fact that
Sorry.
no, I think it was more so the fact that he knew Kelly and knew about Kelly's whole past and I do think he was a little bit um jealous is not the right word I'm looking for, but it's something
Defensive?
similar to jealousy. Huh?
Defensive of Kelly?
Kind of, yeah, yeah. That's a good word for it. So in the line of questioning, the sheriff does get a little jabby with him and tries to trigger him. And I don't know what he was trying to get out of it because it really didn't seem like he was trying to get him to confess to the murder. It was like he was trying to get him to confess to just knowing who she was, knowing where she was at, what she was involved in.
I
That
think he
kind
was
of
just trying to establish some sort of baseline. I think he was poking the bear to try to get him to react and overreact and show his true colors because he clearly was very angry and he controlled himself after that last question, but he about blew his lid just after 3 questions. And it was all just obviously poking about his brother. So he clearly wasn't that good
yes.
of an actor. So I think the intention was to just keep poking and poking and poking to see what will come out.
Yeah.
Which
Um
we know he hated Kelly, so if he wasn't
I mean,
careful, he was going to say something in that interview that he didn't need to say.
so we then get to the part where Adam ends up escaping to go track down Rebecca to see what she has found out, which is kind of a dumb decision to escape to find out what she had found out. It really was a stupid decision on his part for sure. But I think that even further deepened his case of being solidified almost because the prosecution just at this point had things stacked up against him. You've broke out of your house arrest and then on top of it now you're escaping to go to some random woman's house that you and honestly to me in my mind that was an easy setup for the prosecution to be like well now he has a third woman that he's involved with so maybe he murdered her to go with his third person. It just seemed like he was basically setting up the prosecution's whole argument for them.
Yeah. No, literally. I was scrolling through my phone just now because I was trying to find the voice message that I sent to you and read the transcript of it because I literally texted you and said, however, Adam is a moron. I'm currently reading about how he's running in the woods after escaping. So, what an idiot. Like, the entire time I read this book, that's what I keep coming back to. Adam is so dumb. Whether that was intentional ignorance or whether or not he just was ignorant to what his wife has done for the past 10 years, I don't know. But He was very ignorant. There is not a chance in this world that escape is ever a good idea.
Mhm.
There's not. You will be caught. It might not be in the first 5 years, but you will be caught at some point, and it's going to be even worse than once you're caught. Okay? Much less Adam. Like, you're not some escape
Mhm.
artist, and it makes you look even guiltier. And if the death penalty is on the table, why would you continue to risk making yourself look guiltier?
Yes.
And then not only does he escape, but you know where he runs? To little old Rebecca. Like Rebecca's gonna take care of him. I don't
Well,
know.
and when he gets there, my thing with Rebecca's situation and this scene with her whenever he gets to her house, what really confuses me is she's terrified and she says Scott's been the one that's following her.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's what they were trying to deflect back, but she generally seems scared. But was she scared of Bob? Like, who was the guy in the bushes?
I think that was
Was
Scott in
also
the
the
bushes. I think Scott was stalking her because she was helping Adam, and I think he found out, and I think he was stalking her to see what she was doing and what she knew, and that's why she was actually scared. And I
I mean,
think that was the
I
whole
just felt.
point. I think they wanted to set that up too to fall back on Scott, I think.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I just found it super suspicious that she was so terrified of Scott and all that. We never really know whether or not he ever goes and actually talks to Rebecca, so we don't know if that was just Bob and Sarah setting that up or what the case was. But then get to the scene where some guy sneaks into Sarah's bed in the middle of the night and we never find out who that is until the very end, but I thought it was Matthew. I generally thought it was Matthew sneaking in there because of that comment about he could be in love with you comment and then just kind of his willingness to give her whatever she needed. I just really generally thought it was her. I did not expect it to ever be Bob, but
So I didn't think
I
it
just
was Matthew because they had went to dinner that night. And so I thought, well, if they were going to hook up, he would have just come back with her. It doesn't make sense for him to then sneak in. I thought it was Anne, to be honest. I was convinced it was Anne at that point. I never once thought it would be Bob. I never once thought that
yeah.
for sure. And to me, this whole sneaking in the dark and pretending that like it's a stranger that's like broken into your house or something, like that's obviously not vanilla sex, but you've been having vanilla sex with your husband for the past 10 years. That didn't make sense to me. Not that I really care what kind of sex they had in their lifetime, but because it impacts, like, again, coming back to whether or not Adam is capable of murder, whether or not he has a temper, and things like that. I don't know. I have a lot of questions.
Yes. So there is a quote that I want to kind of read from Sarah that now looking back on it, it does make me kind of wonder if I should have for sure knew it was her to begin with. Because she says, I guess someone might advise you to start, which in the moment I thought it was just because he had escaped and it was a stupid decision and it pretty much sealed the deal for him. But I guess someone else might advise you to start praying in the situation because you're going to need a miracle to get out of this. But I don't believe in God, so you're on your own for the time being. So now looking back on it, I'm just like, yeah, you are going to need God because he's the only one that can basically get you out of this at this point because I sign, seal, and deliver your death penalty, basically.
I
So we
think
get
she
into
would
the
have said
trial.
that anyways, though, even if it wasn't her husband that she had set up for murder. I think any defendant who is on trial for double homicide and the death penalty is on the table, and then you escape and get caught again, you
And
are,
break house arrest.
yeah, you are, I'm sorry. You don't have a chance getting out of that.
So we get into the trial, and Sarah, in her opening statement, which is the only part of the trial we actually end up hearing, makes six different statements. She says, one, I know for a fact that Scott, Kelly's husband, threatened to take her life on the night of her murder, which there was text messages that confirm that. Two, I know for a fact that Kelly's real name is Jenna Way, and Jenna Way, well, Jenna is quite interesting woman indeed. Jenna was accused of murdering her first husband, Greg Miller, before mysteriously fleeing the state of Wisconsin and then magically appearing in Virginia with a new name, new hair color, whole new everything. Three, I know for a fact there are numerous people who will be presented throughout the case from Kelly's, or I should say Jenna's, past life that have motive to kill her in order to get justice for Greg. Four, I know for a fact that Kelly was sleeping with at least three different men, all in a very short time period. How I might know this, you ask? Because the medical examiner found sperm carrying three different DNA profiles in her vagina. 5, I know for a fact that Kelly had a stalker by the name of Jesse Hook who frequented her workplace just to get a glimpse of her. And Adam Morgan did not kill Kelly Summers. So then she finds out that it's a quick decision. We end up getting a scene of we the judge and jury find kind of statement, and then it just fades off. And then we get forward to 11 years, the day of Adam's execution, and we're in Sarah's point of view. She gets her final visit with Adam, and he basically asks, is there any new evidence? Is there something that can save me? And she says no. End up finding out that the DNA belonged to the sheriff at this point, and she knew about this before the trial. We get his point of view, and he's asking her, did you think they'd ever find the real killer? Do you know if the trial turned out differently? He starts asking all the what if questions, and he kind of confronts her too about she finally gave up on him. She found somebody else that she's now in a relationship with, and she
She got a whole kid with this man. Like,
yeah. She basically ends up giving him a stare with a smile, and she says, Adam, you will spend the rest of your brief life thinking about me, and I want you to know that I will never think about you ever again. And she sort of nonchalantly, without actually saying it, says, I know exactly who did this. I know exactly what happened. And Adam basically goes under this execution looking and thinking, Sarah did this. Sarah did this to me,
yeah.
which is kind of a terrible way to go out, to know that your wife did it. But granted, you did cheat on her. But at the same time, it's kind of a terrible way to go out that
Granted,
you're
you did
like,
cheat on her, so you kind of deserved it. No.
well, I mean, basically just saying, man, I didn't deserve this. And here I am doing this. But
Well, I don't think he deserved to be executed because he cheated. However,
no.
you do have to accept responsibility that the decisions you made did lead to these consequences. She also made poor decisions, but it did start with you. Although, of course, Adam would say it didn't. Adam would say it started with Sarah not being a loving wife.
Well, and we end up finding out a story about her mom when she was younger, overdosing in her hotel room, one of the scenes with Eleanor. And we end up finding out that actually Sarah is the one that stuck more needles in her arm to cause her to overdose. She basically unravels her entire plan. She ended up finding out about Adam and his infidelity, and then finding out who Bob was, and they kind of started cracking a plan to get Adam convicted, which I still feel like is very severe for the crime. The punishment didn't meet the crime kind of thing. But we end up finding out that Sarah was actually the one that ended up sneaking into the cabin and murdering Kelly. Bob was out of town at that point in time, kind of planned that way. And then the sheriff didn't know that it was them, but he just trying to cover up his own crimes or being involved, didn't test Adam for the drugs, or didn't properly test him for the drugs to keep him knocked out. There was a lot of thought that went into it, to be honest, and I think that her job really helped her be able to cover that up for sure. I don't think it was a matter of luck. I think it was really just the research of previous cases she may have been involved in that definitely had her good luck.
Well, it certainly played to her favor that not a single person suggested. Well, at the very beginning, they suggested maybe it was her, but very briefly, and then nobody ever came back to that thought. Nobody ever, never once thought it could have been her, which doesn't make sense to me. That is very common when the mistress dies. That could have been the scorned lover, obviously. So that was a shock to me, but it was very brief. They thought it might have been her. Then they were satisfied with the way she reacted to the news and then moved on about their day. Which I'm not going to lie, every time she threw up, I thought she was pregnant. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
no, that's going to cause a whole other host of problems. But then we find out she actually has been sleeping with someone else anyway. So then I thought, well, maybe it's not his.
Well, and to be honest, she makes the comment, a divorce would have given Adam half of everything I own. He didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve me. So she basically stayed married to him until the very last minute because she wanted him to have nothing, which it's not like he could have done much with nothing. Well, and I do find it a little bit of a jab that her and Bob actually moved out to the lake house, and the whole thing ended up at the lake house, which I
Yeah.
just found crazy. I wouldn't want to be living in a house that somebody got murdered in. I mean, no matter who it is. But
Well,
that's just my personal opinion.
and obviously Sarah murdered her, so Sarah probably doesn't care. And there is a new mattress, so that doesn't matter. But I wouldn't want to raise my child in the house that I murdered somebody.
No.
That's what got me.
So what was your final rating on the book?
I probably would give it a 4.5. There were some questions left unanswered that I would have liked, even if there wasn't like an actual final answer, there would have been like more hints or something more connected to it. And I would have liked that the procedure with the law side had been just a little bit better because there were some things I feel like were a little misleading. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I couldn't hardly put it down. I texted Emily while I was reading it and I was like, I'm going to finish it tonight. I got to get through it. I got to know what happens. So I actually really enjoyed it. But yeah, what's yours?
So I would say probably a 4.6 or 4.7. I really enjoyed the mystery, and I did switch back a whole lot with who the killer could possibly be.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of like a murder mystery dinner kind of
Yeah, I
thing, like
love
who
that
did
vibe.
it. It was very hard to pinpoint exactly who it could be, and then there was so many different combinations for me of, oh, it could be Anne and Sarah, it could be Matthew and Sarah, it could just be Matthew, it could just be Anne, it could be just Sarah. Oh, it may be Scott this time.
Yep.
It was a lot of flip flop back and forth. I do not like that. If this was set up as a case, I do wish that we end up finding out Sarah's whole just behind everything. I do wish that a lot of the unanswered questions were answered. So there was a couple things that I would knock off, because if we are really going to have everything out there in the open, why not have all the answers to all the questions? That just kind of bothered me a little bit. But I do have to say the biggest fault I had also with it wasn't a lot of accuracy with some of the legal stuff, but I also had a problem with the expectation of having a try. I expected to go through the whole thing, and instead I feel like it was a lot of stories and things that, yes, were important, but even the investigation was brief compared to how it actually is, and really didn't give answers to a lot of questions, and
Yeah.
really the sheriff didn't seem interested in investigating a lot of it. So I feel like if it was more of a long trial and a brief investigation, it would have, to me, scored higher.
She could have had the whole book actually been the trial and like what evidence was put on, and like when she introduced a piece of evidence, relate it back to like this is how it was found, this is what happened or whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because they would have testified to that anyway, so it all would have connected, and that actually would have been a pretty cool concept to see from the beginning to end of a trial. But yeah, I
Or
don't know.
even if she just made 2 books and she was like, "This is the whole investigation and this is the whole trial." I mean, I would have been invested in that too, because I would have wanted to know how it ended. It would have been
Yeah.
a good cliffhanger to start it off with.
Well, and we hyped Sarah up so much, I kind of wanted to see her in action.
Yes, that was probably the biggest letdown, is we didn't see more of the trial, to be honest. I'm really curious of what evidence solidified so quickly for the jury to say he did it. He's guilty. And not only that, but that even the Innocence Project wouldn't even take on his case.
I agree. It was interesting to me that that was even mentioned in this, considering we didn't get to see what was at trial, and what is introduced at trial impacts whether or not his appeal would be successful. So that was interesting.
Well, and I really was curious of how, if she's the best defense attorney in the world, if she really did end up doing it, how in the world she was going to still be able to hold her title of, oh wow, she really tried her best, she was still the best defense attorney, she gave him the best defense kind of angle, if she really was the one that did it. Because I mean, I wasn't sold that she wasn't the one that did it, even though she had all these alibis. I just thought she had a partner where she had all the alibis and she hired somebody else to do it. I think there was a lot of it that went unanswered because it was missing from the story. And I honestly, I think if we had gone to trial completely and we gone through the whole trial in the book, or even a second book, I probably would have given it 5 stars just with that, because I know that there had been so much information that sold this jury on it was a hard no. Well, probably not 5 star, but I'd say at least a 4.9 in that case, just because of that. But that's
Well,
me.
and I would say it's a lot easier, unfortunately, than you would think to convince a jury to convict somebody. So, with all the circumstantial evidence that was against him, she can try to argue her way out of it, but pretty much any jury is going to convict. So,
Well, and I do think it was easy with his 2 escapes, basically, that he did. I do think
yeah,
that kind of solidified a lot of it, but I still would have at least would like to hear what her argument could have possibly been
I
to
agree.
try to get out of it.
I agree. Well, if you liked this episode or any of our other episodes, please subscribe to get access to bloopers, extra content, and more on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube.
You can also send us book suggestions, comments, or general inquiries to our email at likewereadthem@karlandempodcast.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We hope you comment on our post, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts.
We appreciate you tuning into this episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Next week, as you probably already know, we'll be discussing The Lovely Bones, Alice Sebold. And just a heads up, if you listen to this before you listen to the next episode, you should definitely check out some trigger warnings for that book before you start. Chapter 1 is a very intense scene. But
Yes.
as always, we promise to Carl 'em like we read them.
Theme song.